Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm so excited to see so many of you here today. What we do every year at the convention, when issues and questions keep coming up over and over again, we track that because we want to know what are the issues and concerns of our community. And one theme that kept coming over and over again was, the question of divorce. What do we do? Sometimes it needs to happen, and then where do you go for help, right? And so when we suggested this topic, we weren't really sure if people were going to show up, and we didn't know how many people would be interested in this topic. But alhamdulillah, you guys have all proved us wrong, and we recognize this is an issue. And I think one of the things to also remember is each one of us have probably been impacted by divorce, either directly or indirectly. Either we've thought about it, we've gone through it, a relative has gone through it, a loved one has gone through it, and if you're like me, when these situations happened, we really didn't have anywhere to go beforehand. Alhamdulillah, the situation has changed. And so what I want to do is kind of tell you about some of what we can do to help individuals. So again, like I said, we kept seeing this issue over and over again. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Family and Youth Institute, one of the things that we really work towards is meeting your needs. We know that there are issues in the community, but we can't just use anecdotal evidence to give direction and suggestion. We need to understand what the problem is, what the challenges are, do the research to give our community the best that we can given our realities, understand not only what is a problem, but what are the solutions? What are we going to do about this? And then develop resources to help you and me through this process, right? And as we develop this, we need to give it back to all of you to use. And for you to give us feedback on, does this help? How does it help? What does it help? What do you need? So again, Ratib had mentioned earlier that, if you have time after the session and want to share with us your experience and how things have helped you, please do share. Amina's up here front, and she can work with you later on after the session to get that feedback. But the idea is we're constantly in service of our community. What are your needs and how do you get it? And so similarly with the issue of divorce, right? We all know someone who's gone through it, right? And so we wanted to know, what do we do about it, right? And so we had a study, and in that study, we recognized there is really nothing out there on the Muslim community on this topic. And so we had to use some of the research that was done for other communities and to kind of help us understand what to do. And then we interviewed imams, social workers, therapists, individuals who've been divorced to go through what were the challenges that they had, what were the needs that they had. And then we did a survey, and that survey had 387 people participate and give us information about what did they need, what did they want, what type of help was needed for us as a community. And so you have this, FYI has a divorce toolkit, which covers multiple different topics based on the feedback that you all gave. In this toolkit, it covers, what do you do if you're thinking about divorce, right? Because sometimes it takes time to figure out, is there hope for this relationship? Is there something, if I can do some therapy, if I can talk, if I can work it, how long do I keep trying? And it talks about also, what do you do and how do you keep yourself safe and helpful and healthy when you're going through the divorce? And then how do you handle after divorce? Because it's a loss of a relationship. And there's a lot of feelings, emotions, and challenges that you have to deal with. So where is the support for that? And then some of us want to consider remarriage. So what are the issues and considerations for that? And then other topics such as later in life, children, all of those. So I'm not going to be able to cover all of that. I'm going to try to just do high points for some of these topics, but I would encourage you to do look at the website. I think there was a QR code that was passed around with that information. All you have to do is just scan it and you can get access to those resources immediately. But I want to start off with a poll, because I know it's after lunch and a lot of us are a little bit tired. So if you want to text 22333 and enter Sameera Ahmed 180. Okay? Text 22333, enter Sameera Ahmed 180. Your information will not be, you don't have any identifying information, so don't worry about that. So you do that, and then I want to ask you a question to get a sense of where everybody else is in the room. You guys all set? Can I change the screen? Yes? No?
You want to ask the question so they can think about it, Walter?
The question is, what stage of kind of the divorce process are you in right now? Okay.
Do you want to give them options, or do you want to
there are options up there. Ready? Okay. Can you guys see it? And I'm not sure if the poll is working. So if you guys are setting it up, so you have contemplating divorce, in the midst of a divorce, oh, it's working. Post-divorce, remarriage, later divorce, or supporting a loved one through a divorce, right?
And they're answering with one letter?
One letter.
The letter that's next to the one.
Right? And realizing that when we talk about the topic of divorce, people are at different stages. And you may be here unmarried wanting to prevent a divorce as well, right? So, and for those of you who are here for that reason, I commend you, right? Because that's extremely smart. But you want to know what are these different things. So we see, we see people who are contemplating divorce, post-divorce, and others. And alhamdulillah, and hopefully what we can do is provide a glimpse of some of the resources that are available and help you understand that, you're not alone in a lot of these things. And so we'll start with that. For those of you who are kind of thinking about divorce, you've tried you've tried conflict resolution, you've talked to different people, you different things. You want to really make sure you assess your marriage when you're in a calm state, not when you're emotionally angry, upset, frustrated. You want to think, when you're thinking about these issues, how much of the issue is you? What have you done, like Sheikh Kafa was saying, can you control in the situation? Have you done everything that you can in your ability to help this relationship? Recognizing, have you gone to professional help? Not at the end when everyone's kind of called it quits, but initially as an issue has happened, right? If you can, because a lot of times, as we talked yesterday in the conflict session, a lot of it is, misunderstanding, miscommunication. And if you can address it, great. But you want to be able to go through that process of figuring out, discerning, is there hope in this relationship, right? And as you're doing that, you also want to educate yourself. What if you were to get a divorce, what all does it entail? How do you prepare yourself? What are the things that you need to think about beforehand? What are the resources you need to gather to make sure you're making an educated, informed decision? And as you're constantly doing that, make istikhara, right? You can never leave these matters just to kind of your whim. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance as you go through this process of trying to figure out, is there hope, is there change, is there something that we can do? You've educated yourself, and then you start to make the decisions and work towards that. And as we're talking about this, if people have any specific reflections about this stage, any concerns or questions, feel free to put that in. So we can all be thinking about it. We're going to keep the questions for the question app, but if you have any kind of reflections about this stage that you'd like other people to be aware of, so that they can find solace. But this time period is really confusing because you don't know what to do, you need support, you need direction, and sometimes you're getting confusing information. And so that's why the anchor is really important, that spiritual anchor, as well as the educational information, being able to say, okay, I've done everything that I can, I have all the information, I have all my ducks in order, I know what's going on, right? So recognizing that these stages of kind of thinking of should I get a divorce or not takes time. And I've worked with people where sometimes it's taken years to recognize over and over again that, okay, I do need to leave this relationship, right? And so then you will go to the midst of divorce, where it's recognizing that there is this emotional roller coaster of going up and down and confused, and recognize that divorce, the emotions associated with divorce, it's not a linear process. It's not you do one stage, then you do next, and then you do, no, it's like up and down. You get triggered by a situation, you go back, all the way back. All of these things happen. There's this emotional roller coaster of anger, guilt, confusion, hope, fear, all of these things. And you need to recognize that these are normal experiences in the divorce process, right? And as you're going through that, sometimes you're angry at yourself. Why did I stay in this relationship so long? Why am I so dumb? And we say mean things to each other. When you're down, you don't need to beat yourself up even more, right? You need to get support. And so when you're doing that, really make sure to take care of yourself. Physically, make sure you're eating, make sure you're sleeping, you're getting the help. Cognitively understand what are the stages of divorce, what are the resources, where to get help, how to get help. Emotionally, grieving the relationship, right? Understanding your emotions, why you're feeling this way, where are they coming from? All of this kind of processing takes time, and I would highly recommend working with a therapist on these issues. Making sure socially, you have people around you. Because going from being a couple and a family to now working towards singlehood, it's often difficult because your social support is often not there. Make sure you have those social support. Reach out to people, ask them, do things with people. You need that. And spiritually, relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making dua in your sujood, right? So these are things that you want to be able to do, that as you're going through that divorce, you're relying on all the resources available to you. And when you're interacting with your spouse, as much as possible, work towards a collaborative divorce as much as you can. Because we recognize realities, it may not always happen, but if you can, it's better for your mental health, their mental health, and your kids' mental health, right? And recognize that when you're communicating with your spouse, soon to be ex-spouse, try to be brief in your interactions, friendly, informative, but firm. Start maintaining, you have to make sure you start separating emotionally from him or her. Also recognize there's going to be low expectations. Things may be promised, it may not happen. It's part of the process, right? Expect that will happen. And be content that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you and you're doing the best that you can in that situation. And when it comes to your children, if you have children, make sure you're thoughtful and age appropriate in how you tell your kids, right? Because where they are developmentally, how old they are, is going to matter how they take this and how they're going to understand the relationship. If they're younger, they may believe it's their fault. If they're older, they may have reactions. Again, as a parent, if you can, do it together in a transparent way. Again, we have resources on that, but you really want to make sure you reassure your kids and emphasize that divorce, it's not their fault. It's an issue between you and your spouse, and really communicate stability. And it's okay to kind of say, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to help you, and we're going to work together through this process. Right? And then we talk about post-divorce, right? Once the divorce is finalized. Sometimes people believe that, okay, once the divorce is over, okay, I'll be okay. Things will be wonderful. I'll be fine. I'll be able to deal with it because, my spouse is out of my life, the stressor. But you got to realize that you're mourning a loss of a relationship. And that's going to take time to resolve, and you'll have to have time to grieve over that. And so you want to make sure that you recognize that, obviously the theme of the conference, right? With hardship comes ease, right? There will be ease after this hardship, but you need to go through that process, right? You'll need to develop a toolkit of coping, how to process your emotions. When you get triggered, what do you do? How do you calm yourself? What do you do to distract yourself? What do you do to get support? Who do you go for support? You need to have that toolbox. You want to be able to explore emotionally what's underlying these emotions that you're having when you're getting triggered. Why are you getting triggered? Processing what's going on, right? And you want to be around individuals who are uplifting and positive. Because just because you've got a divorce doesn't mean you're a pariah. There's no need to be ostracized. There's no need to think that your world is over. When we look at the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, you see companions, many different companions, great individuals who happen to get a divorce. Some people just it doesn't work out, and you have to grow from that experience. But it takes time. And so really try to reframe this aloneness as a tool for reflection, honesty, and kind of recognizing where your potential for growth, what are the things that you need to work through, so that when you go into a new relationship, if you choose to do so, you're in a better place. And again, when you're talking about children, make sure that the home environment that you're creating, you want to really try to maintain positive relationship as much as you can with them as well as your ex, to make sure you try to be on the same page on parenting. It's not always going to happen, but do the best that you can. Right? And helping them, having a co-parenting approach will really help in your children's adjustment post-divorce. Okay? And then when it comes to marriage readiness, if you decide that you want to get married again, right? Really think about what's motivating your desire. Are you jumping from one relationship to the other without processing your previous relationship? Because if you do that, you're setting up your second relationship up for failure. You're more likely to get a divorce. So give yourself some time after the first relationship to process what happened, why it happened, how would you feel, what did you learn, how can you grow, all of these things you want to kind of think through. And then also, what's your relationship like with your ex or your children? Again, talking them through the process as well. And before you actually consider going on to a new relationship, have you emotionally healed? So we're running out of time, and I apologize. But I do want to highlight a couple different resources because there's no way we could cover everything. The FYI has a number of different resources. We have the Divorce Toolkit that kind of walks you through this process. There's a webinar that we cover this topic as well. And a therapy guide, because oftentimes in this process, you're going to need some help walking through and addressing the issues. And then if you decide to get remarried, there's a marriage toolkit. In addition, we do have an online program, Prepare to Pair, a marriage online module that you can go through as a course. And it helps you through to kind of figure out what are the areas that you need to work on that may be of conflict, maybe an area of conversation that needs to be addressed before you take the next step of marriage with the individual that you decided to work through. In addition to the resources that FYI has, there are many other, alhamdulillah, organizations that have been doing some amazing work. Wasila organization, one of the individuals are up here in the front. They do amazing work by providing support services, virtual support services for individuals. I've sent my patients, individuals that I've worked with in therapy, to them. And working how to deal with parenting loss and changes and support, all of that is wonderful, and I would urge you to use those resources. Also, a lot of times you don't know what the resources are available or what are the issues legally that you have to kind of address. Sheikh Kafab mentioned a couple, but also there is a YouTube channel, Chicago Muslim Divorce Lawyer. If you just follow him, he has a number of different sessions that will be helpful. And when it comes to domestic violence, Peaceful Families has a lot of resources and information, education that can help you as well. And ISPU is a collaborator of ours who did some research on the topic of divorce as well. So all of these resources are there. Alhamdulillah, we're in a better place as a community than we were 10 years ago. We have a number of different resources. We ask that you please use these resources as well as additional resources that we do have. The QR codes will help you find those resources, as well as if you want to go to our website. And here's a QR code, and Jazakallah khair, and I'll pass it on to Ratib.
Jazakumullah khair for both of our speakers.